Oh, it's so hot.
Hi guys, it's Adam at the Astro-Imaging channel. Today we're just doing a live chat, and we have a couple topics to start with. As people keep filling the room, we'll go over other topics. I am opening up a Q&A, so if you're out there, you can ask stuff in Q&A. But for now, our first topic is actually going to be narrowband filters, the differences between them, and what everyone thinks about each. We have a few different people in the room, so let's go around to the first person who actually asked the question. Josh, your question specifically narrowband filters.
Yeah, so I can go a little more into specifics about it and my experiences with it. I've only used the Beta 7 nanometer hydrogen alpha and the Beta 8.5 nanometer oxygen 3. I've also used the clip-in astronomic HA 12 nanometer filter. And I definitely see better contrast as you go down in your bandwidth, which makes sense. I also noticed that I probably need to bump now to an hour at 5 nanometers. It's barely getting off the floor. And then I guess the other question was going to be mostly about oxygen, and is there a big difference between the 5 nanometer and the 3 nanometer? And does it make sense to go down to the 3 nanometer, and also am I going to have to expect to take like 45-minute long exposures to get that off the floor? I don't know if anybody has experience with them.
Yeah, I've got the 5. I have 5, 5, and 3. So I have 5 HA, 5 S2, and then 3 O3. Now, where did you want to start? Which question would you like answered first? Because we could go.
Let's start with the oxygen question.
So you're just more curious. So you're curious about why we would go to a 3 versus a 5, and whether or not the sub-exposure lengths are going to be, or whether they're required to be longer in order to make up for the decreased amount of signal.
Correct, and also maybe a comparison about whether I'm taking shots from my driveway in the red zone or driving an hour and a half away to a much better site.
Gotcha. So I'll just give you my reasoning behind it. So my reasoning was purely based on technical reasons, by going with the 3 nanometer O3. Primarily it's blue-green light, right? So we know that because of the shorter wavelength, it's going to be subject to scattering in the atmosphere. So I tend to take my O33 NM during. I stay away from moonlit nights as well, because it is highly susceptible to that, as well as light pollution. At least I have found that personally. And I'm imaging at f5. So one of the things that we need to take into consideration here before we really dive down into it is that the shorter your focal length becomes, the decreased transmission rate or the decreased transmittance you're going to have with that particular filter. If you go to the Astrodon FAQ site, he's got a nice page that is devoted just to that and explaining the reasoning behind it. As for longer exposure times, again, it just depends on your focal length. I know he guarantees 90% transmittance at f9 and above, and it looks like it is fairly, and if I remember right, I should probably just look this up right now. Between f9 down to all the way to f5, it looked like it was fairly steady. It looked like it was above 90% the entire time. But once you started getting past f5, it started to dip down a little bit lower towards like 60%, if I remember correctly, once you hit the f3.5 or f4 mark, if I remember right.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, if I remember right here. I'm actually just going to pull this up right now, so that way I am not providing any misinformation. And I'm just scrolling down here, looking it up, and I
don't want to interrupt you, Hytham.
No, go ahead, man.
In my research, and everything you're saying is completely accurate, Astrodon site, but there aren't many alternatives if you're imaging at really, really fast focal lengths and need higher transmission, as far as I've seen.
Yeah, so looking at Astrodon's page here, yeah, it says, yeah, at f9, f10, so he does guarantee at f9 over 90% or greater than 90% transmittance, and as it starts to hit around the f5 mark, that's when you start seeing to drop a little bit. But once it gets to around the f3.5, that's when you start seeing a huge decrease in transmittance. So what I started doing to compensate for that, because I image at f5 and it's not too bad. I've only done one object with my O3 filter actually. No, I've done 3. Wow, that's ridiculous. I've done 3. So I've done the elephant trunk, I've done the heart and soul, and I've done the Cygnus loop. And I did the Cygnus loop at f5, but I did the elephant trunk as well as the heart and soul at f3.65, and I noticed a huge difference. I can't. Now, one of the things that, of course, you're going to take into consideration, though, is the amount of O3 signal that is natively resident in that object that you're imaging. Cygnus loop has tons of it. I noticed that the heart and soul wasn't too much. It was there, but it wasn't too much. And that one was just a nightmare to deal with. I had other flat issues. And the elephant trunk definitely needs a significant amount of sub-exposures, from my point of view.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't you also have to get the sky background off of the noise floor as well?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I thought. So that's where that's where I was wondering if, changing your sights is going to make a difference on your selection. If I'm shooting at f7 from the city, which I normally do, then I could probably keep it down to 20 to 30 minutes. But if I go to a dark site, you might need an hour-long exposure to get it off the floor. I don't know. I think you imaged from a darker site than me, but I'm not sure.
No, I imaged from my driveway, which is a red zone.
Oh, okay. Same thing.
Yeah, so because I did the O3 from a red zone. I did all 3 O3s from a red zone, and it didn't have that much trouble. At least I didn't notice any huge issues. When the moon was up, it was a significant problem. Absolutely, it has to be.
Too, right?
Yeah, there were a lot of gradients because I did the heart and soul acquisition when the moon was probably, I don't know, 70 degrees away from it, so it wasn't far enough, and it affected the image significantly. So when I did my Cygnus loop, I did it with the moon. I think the moon was only 20% illuminated, and it was waxing at that point, and it was pretty good. It was fairly well. But what I've read online, a lot of people recommend that the O3 should be done on a moonless night if you can.
So it sounds like you would recommend the 3 nanometer.
I would go 3. Go as narrow as possible for that one.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What focal length are you imaging at?
That's for Josh, right?
Yeah, for Josh.
I'm at 735 millimeters. My next scope will probably be a wider one rather than the narrower one. I'll probably go down to like 300 or 400.
Yeah, I do. In my experience, getting the read noise off the noise off the floor with now. I'm using the beta filter, so I'm at 7 or 8 nanometers, but it also has to do with your focal length, because if you're faster, it's just going to do a little bit more to get it off the floor, and that's been my experience. I'm kind of right there with you because I'm considering the Astrodons. I don't think the betas do quite a good enough job. I notice a difference using the beta filters in a red zone versus kind of an orange zone, which is where I go for darker skies. So that tells me a lot. If there's that much of a difference, then that means a narrower filter would probably give me that much more of a gain.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of looking 5 nanometer H alpha, and then probably 3 nanometers for the other 2, just to take all the advantage of everything and not lose the N2.
Yeah, I think that's the route that I'm looking at going. It seems like a lot of people end up going that route too, but I guess to move over to the H alpha, the 7 nanometer H alpha did pretty well for me. The 5 nanometer is just a little bit crisper. It looks like maybe it could use longer exposures, but I could definitely see it. The oxygen was pretty disappointing for me with the beta filter. So.
What camera? You were using your modified DSLR, correct?
Yeah, I was using that, so
okay.
I did move over to that QSI, so we'll see the difference there, I guess. So it's changing too many things at once to really get a good comparison.
Could I say something here? I
Yeah.
missed parts of the conversation at various times because of the I don't know what happened to Google, but I have a QSI 583 with 3 nanometer filters. I image at about 670, I think it is, millimeters. I don't think it's so much the focal length that matters, but the f ratio, as far as the image shift. So I don't think you have to worry about it too much unless you're going really, really fast scope. I talked to Don Goldman rather extensively about it before I bought my filters. And one of the things you got to remember is that whether you got 3 or 5 nanometers, it's supposed to be letting in 90-some% of the light. So it really is a question of how narrow and which lights you're excluding on either side. I chose to go with the 3 nanometer because it does allow imaging more into the moonlight than before. One of the considerations that never did bother me, and I do agree that, yeah, if you're not careful, particularly in the O3, you'll get a lot of moonlight will affect the picture, so you really want to avoid imaging in O3. But the others you can get away with a lot of imaging. You just get some weird gradients you got to cope with. But Don talked me into the 3 millimeters or 3 nanometers, and I've been happy with them. Been using them for about a year, about 2-3 years now, I guess. So you'll be happy with them.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with going with the 3 across the board. For me, for hydrogen alpha, as Adam stated previously, was that I stuck with 5 because if I ever end up with a longer focal length telescope, I do want to image planetary nebulae, and I did not want to lose that N2 line. He does have a separate N2 filter, but I did not feel like spending, what was it, $2,500 on that 10-spot, 10-position filter wheel that FLI has. So I decided to compromise and just go with a 5, with the 5 nanometer HA, 5 nanometer S2 instead. Now, one of the things that you still should be careful with the 5 nanometer, even the 3 nanometer, and you're imaging near the moon, you will get gradients. I did do a comparison on cloudy nights one night. I was really annoyed. It was my first clear night in a long time, and my object was sitting very, very close to the moon, and you could see the huge difference. I think the ADU count was from between, I think it's typically 1,800, and then with the moon out, it was around 4,000 to 5,000. It was crazy high. So,
I had a problem the other day where I was going to a new object, a little cocoon or something like that, and I told Sequence Generator Pro to send it over there, and so its first plate solve, smack on the moon. It went there, and boom, it was right on the moon. I figured, well, that's that. It screwed up, and because it did a sync and everything on the mount, it screwed everything up, and I had to go out there and kick my telescope mount. So.
Well, I appreciate it. It sounds like that was my thinking anyways, but it does sound like it's really the way to go. And if you're going to spend that much, you may as well spend an extra, 150 or 160 and go all the way.
Yeah, if you want the contrast, go with the 3. If it's within your budget, just get the 3. For you guys, I think you guys can use the 1 1/4s on those 8300s, or you guys are required the 36 millimeter based on the distance and the QSIs.
Assuming you've got the built-in filter wheel, I just have the 1 1/4s.
Okay.
I do too, and they say that there's no vignetting, but there was for me, which was weird. And maybe I should have gotten the 31 millimeter filters, but mine came with LRGB and HA. So for whatever reason, there is definitely vignetting. I mean, it processed out easy.
Yeah, but is the vignetting due to the filters or anything else that could be in the optical train?
I would, I was imaging with my DSLR with the same setup back to the filter wheel and everything.
Oh, you're on a DSLR.
No,
I'm
I'm
the same size chip.
No, I'm on the 683 now, and I have the WSG, so I've got the filter wheel built in. But it was clearly there, and it was due to the filters. There was no actual physical cutoff, but there was vignetting. So, but it processed out too, so I guess it doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah, one of the things that I find interesting about this conversation, I'm surprised more people don't get an NIR filter that Astrodon offers, because I have the Astronomic IR Pro Planet filter. It's like 740 nanometers, if I remember right. I'm surprised more deep sky imagers don't use one of those. I know he offers one, and it's pretty cheap. I think it was like the 50 millimeter square was. I'm not even going to say it until I actually look it up, but it was like a few $100. It was definitely not the $1,300 that you would get the HA03 or S2.
Are those better for like big galaxies?
It's good for if you want to image. If you want to say, like if you like one of my image, like, I shouldn't say it's my image, but one of the images that I just posted recently was the M81 image that was taken by Manuel Jimenez. In the background, behind the dust, there are a ton of little galaxies that are being obscured by the IFN. So you could use it in instances like that, so you can image right through the dust, and you can see a lot of the background data. Now, if you've seen the recent famous Hubble the HSD image of the Horsehead Nebula, and it's in, I think that one was done in infrared, and you can see a million galaxies in behind the dust, and just gives you a whole new view. It's so freaking neat, and I haven't found anyone that images with it.
Or is the 8300 chip sensitive in that range?
Yeah, that's one of the problems. It just depends on the sensitivity of the cameras. A lot of the cameras that we use are not sensitive enough for it, but I think it's down around 30%, if I remember right, at least for my camera.
Better than what my DSLR was.
Yeah, I think
Similar.
Yeah, aren't they close to that? I thought it was around 30% for DSLRs for QE.
That was before it took
less. The atmosphere doesn't affect it as much, correct?
Yeah, because of the longer wavelength. Longer wavelength equals short frequency.
Interesting. I always wondered about that Hubble Horsehead because it looked different. Really
yeah,
different.
I think that one was done in near infrared, if I remember correctly. I'd have to look it up. I can't remember the exact filter they used for it, but I'm fairly positive it was infrared, and it gives you such an awesome view.
Yeah, it really does. That came out at NEAF 2 years ago. I remember looking at it, and it looked like the reverse of what the Horsehead usually looks like, because all the signal was on the other side of the Horsehead instead of inside of it.
Yeah, it's so cool. But yeah, that's one of the things that I'm surprised, because you can even do, I think according to Astrodon's site, and I closed Astrodon's site by mistake, but on there you can use, I think, please don't quote me on this one, but I think you can use a single NIR filter to perform tricolor imaging, I think, if I remember reading that correctly. So I thought that was kind of interesting when I read that. I thought, I didn't know you could do that.
I'll have to look into that. It sounds interesting. I would say, well, while we're talking filters, the one other thing that was really interesting, I think the biggest difference in that first run I did was, I mentioned on Cloudy Nights I was very seriously considering getting a cheap 1100D or something for my star colors. And it was the first time I was able to write a script in Nebulosity and just change through and get those stars into my image. And it took 45 minutes. I mean, it was no time at all. Another 15 minutes to process that RGB image to the point where I could bring those colorful stars in. It was really a pleasure to use that filter wheel.
Okay, I don't see it on his site anymore. He just had it listed here the other day. I must be looking on the wrong page. I'll have to find it.
Posted a link to the Hubble Horsehead. If anybody isn't familiar with it, it's in the group chat. Let's make sure it works. APOD, well deserved.
Yeah, that is an incredible image. Yeah, if you look through it, it's amazing how many galaxies you can see right through the dust.
I'm on the NIR. It says color combined weights for near infrared are 1, 2, 3, are 1 to 1 to 1.2. Produce tricolor images entirely in the NIR. And 1.25 inch mounted is 550, set of 4.
Okay.
So.
Can you post that link into the chat?
Yep.
If you don't mind, please.
I'm doing it right now.
Thank you.
Well, I think that helps with some of my questions. I guess, or it confirms my thoughts on all the questions. Sounds like everybody's thinking about going the same way too.
Yeah, it's one of those, I need a bigger filter wheel. I originally purchased a 5-position filter wheel, and the only reason why I did it, because I know I tell everybody get at least 7, but I went with 5 myself because that Takahashi, I mean, optically brilliant but mechanically deficient focuser on it is just a pain, and any more weight, I'm afraid I'll have the sag again that I had previously, and I just don't want to risk it. I have been debating the 10-position filter wheel that FLI has, but that would require me to remove the entire filter, or the entire focuser, I apologize, and get a fixed body mounting, and then I can't rotate anymore. At least that I know of. And 50mm square filters are godly expensive.
You could buy a nice car.
Yeah, they're $1,300 a pop for the 3nm ones.
Mm-hmm.
I cringed the first time I hit buy now for those filters. Like, you gotta be kidding me. But
They're still sitting in my cart.
Are they really?
Yeah. I bought the William Optics Star 71 instead because the filters aren't going to do me any good with my problem with my flattener distance. I just can't hit the distance I need with my CCD. So I bought the scope, and we'll see. Then I'll buy the filters.
That's why I backed out of that one. I wish they would have just gave another 30mm of back focus on that thing. I know of 3 or 4 people who didn't buy it for that same reason. I think I asked them way back when they announced it. I was like, "What? Can you just put a little more space in there?"
What's the back focus on the QSI? Do you have the OAG?
Yeah, I have the whole setup. Mine is 49.5, so I could do it now.
Yeah, mine's 57, I believe. So from my OAG to my
I could do it now.
Camera, but I can't imagine though adding anything else. I'm not going to get a rotator, so I don't know. We'll see. Your next question was on combining different focal lengths or blending and all that. And are you asking specifically in Photoshop?
Yeah. I guess for me right now it would be Photoshop. How you would do that? I would imagine you would still align them like you normally do in whatever program you use, and then paste them in as a layer or combine the images. But every time I've ever tried to do anything where I combine images that have edges cut off, it's just a hard line right in the middle of the picture. So.
Yeah, so what I do is, just to give you a quick example, because I use PixInsight to do all the alignment, and then I use layers in Photoshop to do the combination. You could do the same thing in PixInsight. So my 12-panel Cygnus mosaic, it has data that I borrowed from Manuel Jimenez for the Crescent Nebula. I figured, his is, I think he's imaging at 0.6263 arcseconds per pixel, whereas I'm doing 3.5, and the detailed look craptastic. So I asked him for permission. He thankfully said yes, and all I did was the simple star alignment. Aligned it, took that information once it was aligned, took it, copied it, pasted into a new layer, then created a hide all mask, and then just painted the region in that I wanted, feathered it out, flattened it, and that was it. It was really, really simple, very straightforward. I think with Photoshop, if you want to do an alignment, it requires at least 40% of the image to be available for it to do an alignment correctly. So if you don't have PixInsight, and I've never used it personally, is Registax. That was another. No, not Registax. I'm sorry, Registrar.
Registar.
Ugh. Is it Registrar or Registrar?
Registar. I think Scott Rosen uses it.
Yeah, that was the one everyone was using prior to. Yeah, it is Registar. You're totally right.
Yeah. So does that mean then the part I guess I don't understand is, do you resample the entire image so you're actually getting the full resolution of the high focal length picture that you bring in there? I mean, the aligning is easy. I can do that even in nebulosity so that it lines up with all the other ones. But I mean,
you do lose some resolution, yeah, but it's not too much. Like, if I'll post up a link here to the Cygnus, and then you can just focus in on the crescent so you can see what it looks like.
I remember when you came out with that. I did look at it, but I guess just technically I don't understand, because your pixels are still the same size, right? So I mean, your arcsecond per pixels don't change even though you put in that new image.
Yep. Yeah, so nothing, like the overall image itself. So what I ended up doing is, when I took the Crescent Nebula, I registered it against the larger mosaic. So what's awesome about PixInsight, if you want to shorten the amount of time as you're building your mosaics and doing the alignment of the individual frames, or you're looking at doing HDR, you can just do a preview of the area, and you can align it just by using the preview. So rather than looking at the entire image and then creating a ransack, excuse me, a ransack of the entire image, what it does is it only looks at the stars that are found within the preview, then uses the ransack algorithm to create the model necessary to align the frames correctly. And once I aligned it to that, it just downsampled my crescent nebula so that it matches the same resolution of the larger image. But when you take a look at the actual fine detail in the crescent, it was very well preserved. I was impressed. I was surprised. I didn't think it was going to be that good.
Yeah, so was I. I thought that it would look like the same as the rest of the image. But so I guess the question is, if you can deal with the size of the image, would you be better off upscaling the rest of your image and keeping the long focal length the same?
Say that again. So you're talking about the inverse?
Yeah, so that way, if you kept the long focal length at its same scale and upscaled the rest of the image,
yeah.
But would you be able to even preserve more detail if you could deal with the overall size of the resultant picture?
Yeah, I'm trying to think how that would turn out.
That'd be tough to deal with the size of the picture. I mean, and there might not be that much of a benefit because then you are upscaling the rest of the picture.
I think on a 12-panel mosaic it certainly would, but if you were taking like a 300 millimeter scope and a 700 millimeter scope together, maybe I don't know. It's interesting to try. It's something that I will try. I was just curious if anyone's done what I was talking about.
Yeah, I've never done the inverse. I've always just scaled it to the image that it was going to be found within. And it turned out quite nice. Like I got the idea from, I was going to say, oh yeah, Thomas Davis. That's who it is. I was going to say John Davis, but that's another imager. Thomas Davis does quite a bit of that stuff. He's out of not Utah, Dakotas? South Dakota maybe? And yeah, he does a lot of what they call his hybrid imaging. So he uses his high focal length, and then he uses his FSQ, his 106, to do the wide field stuff. And it looks awesome. I love the way it turns out.
Me too. I've seen Scott Rosen pointed me to a couple people who do that. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Rob Gendler. Is that his name? Robert Gendler? Yeah, he does that too.
Yeah, he's the one that he pointed me to.
Yeah, he does it.
I have not been able to figure out how to align in Photoshop that way. I've been able to align frames like side by side if there's an overlap, but never align something within Photoshop in that way. I actually bought PixInsight because I wanted to try that and stacking and all that stuff. But
speaking of Rob Gendler, he has often taken Hubble space shots and other people's shots and everything else and put them all together into one great big picture. And I've watched him explain it and stuff like that. And he really goes into a lot of detail about how you have to, each one of the pictures from Hubble is all calibrated in a certain way and so, and you got to match them all up. And it's quite extensive procedure to get it done.
One other person who does that too, adding on to that, is JP. Does that. He does the thing where he shoots with a wide field on top of a narrow field. And he has a tutorial that I haven't got to see yet.
Yeah, it's a lot easier. It's not as hard as you think once you get, if you use PixInsight. I was surprised how easy it was. It was awesome. It just worked out perfectly. You just make the area, as long as you make the preview large enough around the area, so that way when you start painting in Photoshop and brushing it in, you don't start reaching out or extending out towards the boundary of that smaller window or the higher resolution image, so they don't show up. But yeah, because I wanted to use someone else's bubble nebula, because I can see the bubble nebula in my Cygnus as well, but I wanted to use someone else that had a nicer, deeper, higher resolution image of it and paste it in there too.
That was exactly the target I was thinking of after somebody posted that today on Cloudy Nights. I forgot how much cool stuff was in there.
Yeah. Yeah, the Cygnus, you can, oh man, you can spend years in that one area.
Yeah.
Anything else, dude?
I think that's it. That covers what I was curious about. Thank you.
So DBE is next up on the list. What are we looking to go over in DBE? Because is it mostly the settings we use?
Yeah, I think DBE is one of those topics that we could end up speaking hours about. It is a gigantic pain because it's really easy to use in images that have a lot of free background, but then it's really tough to use in images that have little to no free background. That's definitely my weak point because all my images tend to have a lot of dust, and finding free background in there is extremely difficult. And then trying to generate a model that is based on what your background should look like rather than incorporating any of the large-scale structure. I don't know if you guys want to do a walkthrough together so we can take a look at it.
That sounds like a good idea to me. Do you have data you'd like to provide, or?
Yeah, I've got. Let me see. Whose data could we use as an example? I could use. Oh, wait a minute. You know what? I have Mike Miller's data here in front of me, but I won't use his as an example. I'll use one of mine.
Oh, Jimmy Walker. Did he have a top 6 today? Really awesome finish today.
It's a good tournament. That was the best I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
And PixInsight just crashed. Come on. There we go. Oh my gosh. I don't have 3-panel Cepheus. This is one of those that I mistakenly deleted all of my luminance data for this image. I don't know how I did it. I want to cry. I can't find it anywhere. It's not on my laptop. It's not on my spare hard drive. It's not backed up. It's not anywhere. But I do have the final stacked image. That's the only thing I have. So if I lose that, got to go back and recapture 4 hours worth of luminance.
You know, hey, looking through group chat, I see Chris Elliott. Chris, are you asking a question here? Are you in here live someplace, or just asking a question out on? I see a couple comments from you. I liked your picture of the veil there. Do you have a specific issue?
It looks like.
Yeah, he disconnected.
Oh, was that Chris leaving?
Yeah, Chris disconnected as well as Kurt.
Okay. Just didn't want anybody left out. I don't see him here, so.
Yeah, he'll end up rejoining because I know tends to stick with us the entire time. And all right, so I'll just share my screen with you guys here real quick, just to give you guys an idea of what I got to deal with. And finding the right points has always been such a nuisance for me. Screen share, PixInsight, start. So can you guys see the screen?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. So these are 3 different panels that I have. I have this up in my staging area in Astrobin. So this is of Cepheus. This is going to be part of a 3-panel mosaic that I'm working on. So here's the original image. On the far left, this was with the dust enhancement, and this one was I was playing around with star reduction, testing out, and I didn't like it. But as you can see here, just by looking in this area, you can see how much dust there is. It was such a pain to generate a correct model for this, and I still don't think I did it correctly. I don't know if I did ABE or I did do ABE, which is stupid. But let's look at it.
Like, was the result just terrible or something?
Well, with ABE, ABE is excellent if you have a lot of free background. They don't recommend it if you have a lot of dusty areas. They being the guys over at PixInsight. Sure. Because it just automatically generates, and you've got to tweak and tune the parameters very carefully because it's all automatically done for you. Whereas DBE, you just do manual placement, trying to find free sky background. And let me see here with the original image. Please tell me I did not.
How many points do you think you had for this when you generated the one that you're still not happy with?
Oh my gosh, I did delete the stacked image too. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna jump off a bridge. Um, oh, this is not cool. I can't believe I did that. I don't know how. So the number of points, it depends on the image itself.
Like this one. How many do you think you used?
With this one, well, I did an ABE against this one. So if we do an ABE here, and what we can do is with ABE, we can draw the sample boxes. Just try samples, and it'll show you. So here are the number of samples that it did. So if we zoom in, look at that. It got all the dust. Now, if I were to build a background model, of course, this is a nonlinear image, so it's not going to be an accurate representation. That's not too bad. I mean, that's pretty smooth, but I apologize, guys. I thought I had the original stacked image here for this one, and I don't. I lost it. Does anybody else have data that they want to try out?
I can post a link to really bad data.
Bad data, good data, as long as it's data, it's complete.
Adam, I have that the Pickering's triangle if you wanted to look at that again.
Oh, wait a minute. I think I have yours downloaded. The 03 and...
AJ.
Third party, Josh's Pickering Triangle. Here it is. All right. So you guys are going to lose sight of PixInsight for a second. I'll just start it up again. So that'll be a good one. And you guys are going to need to see my screen again. There we go. So you guys can see that? Is that a yes? I'm assuming
Yes,
that's
we
a yes.
can.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Yeah, like with something like this, it was pretty simple. Like, let's do it. Let's take a look at what is generated via a standard ABE, just a background model, so we could do a comparison between the two. So that's the background model here that is generated automatically. And now with DBE, this is the part. On images like this, it's not too bad. It's pretty simple, for me at least. I have far more difficulty. And of course, anybody please speak up, because I'm by no means teaching at this point.
Yeah, Hytham, on yours, it was really dust heavy. Unfortunately, the resolution kind of got bad when you were doing yours.
Okay.
And I can see with this is Josh's data, right?
Yes, it is. This is Josh's.
I can see with Josh's data, like, yes, there are lots and lots of stars, but it's not nebula all over, as if you were to take like a long focal length image of a full nebula, so to speak, or something like that, and you have a gradient going across that. But were you saying with yours you used automatic background extraction, or you used dynamic background extraction?
For the one that I had up previously, I got frustrated because I wasn't liking the models that it was generating. Because you want a smooth model, and you want free background, or free sky background is what you're looking for, because you don't want to incorporate, of course, the dusty areas as a part of the generated model, and then the subsequent subtraction of, because you lose good data or it gets washed out. So I used ABE out of frustration, which is not what you should be doing when it comes to really dusty images. I know I've been successful in the past because I was able to generate, I don't know if it was luck.
When you do have a chance, if you wouldn't mind pulling up your data, did you flip to a different workspace, or?
No, I closed the other screen down, but I can definitely pull it back up.
Yeah, before long, because I didn't notice the gradient going across, and I was wondering specifically in that image where you were looking to improve, because it only looked like there were maybe 2 or 3 spots of actual background in your image.
Yeah, that's one of the things I tried was, what's his name, Rogelio. He downloads images from DSS, and he uses those plates, then aligns them directly to his own images, and builds his model based on that, and then transfers it over. I tried that. It didn't work for me. Not at all.
I didn't realize that was him that was doing that. I heard some guy was doing that. Is it to make up for light pollution gradients?
Yeah, so that way he could just model. Yeah, exactly. It's for light pollution gradients and just generate a proper background model. And I tried it. It didn't work very well for me. I tried it with the M81 data that I was using that belonged to Manuel, and
So, as somebody who does not use PixInsight at all, pretty much, my impression was DB was good at removing gradients and building a smooth background, but is it also used to bring out the dust as well? Or?
yeah,
No. PE is good at bringing out, or PE is good at getting rid of gradients in a linear state. The danger with PE is that if you include any of the dust in your samples, it's going to kill it. So when you don't have many areas available where there are background sky areas, when it's heavily dusty or heavily filled with nebula, that's where it, in my experience, has become really, really difficult to work with. And I've honestly, with the SCT, I've had no problems at all. I have kind of sparse stars. It works perfectly. With the William optics, I've had some slight problems because of like star-heavy areas. I've been able to overcome that by using smaller samples and making sure they're not on stars. But with the heavy nebula region, I have no idea. I've used Gradient Exterminator in Photoshop. So, and that's, I think Python's kind of struggling with that same thing right there.
yeah, because one of the things they always say in every single tutorial I've ever seen about DBE, one of the statement that I always hear is, it's not the quantity, it's the quality. Okay, well, define quality, especially in a dusty background. I have no idea where to put my points. Sometimes I get really lucky, and I hate doing things based on luck. This is a bad model, but I hate doing things based on luck, and that's one of the things that I would definitely like to clear up. And if we can get it figured out in this conversation, that would be fantastic. But I suspect that is an extremely long conversation to have.
Why did you say that's a bad model versus a good model?
So what you want to do is, when you're looking at your models, you're looking for a very smooth one. Like this one here, it looks smooth, like if you're looking at it closely, but the problem is, I'm not sure if you guys can see it very, very well, but in my screen here, I can see that it's incorporated some of the data in the background, or at least from the nebulosity, into this background model that is generated. So this is not a very good model either. Now this one here, this one isn't very good because it doesn't exactly simulate the gradients that I'm seeing in this image. So it does start off a little bit brighter down here. And this one is pretty close, but not exactly correct. And then you've got this black hole. So you don't want black holes in your background model. So it should be a nice smooth gradient from one side to the other. And from here, like I can see, I'm not sure if you guys can see it very well, but it's a little bit darker in here. And it's bright here. And it flows into this region here where it's really bright up top. And then about down here, it's a little bit darker. And the model is pretty close, but not exactly the way I would want it. So what you're doing is, whenever you're generating your background models, is you want to take a look at your image, understand the gradient that's in your image. So you want to take a look at it, and it took me a little bit of time to recognize what is a light pollution gradient versus actual data. The light pollution gradient will look very, very smooth in your image. It makes it look like you've got a ton of great signal, and it looks incredibly smooth, and you can see it immediately once you generate your background model, and it looks similar to what is found in the naturally present in the image. Let's see. Oh, where did I put that? I need to see what I'm clicking on. one of the, should excuse me. Downsample. There it is.
So I guess when I asked that, Adam, you said no right away, and Hytham started saying yes. I guess what it can do is bring more contrast from the signal to the background if you have a bad gradient. Is that why one of you was saying yes and one was saying no?
Yeah, that's why I was saying yes, because it I don't know what's going on with me today. It'll increase the because once you remove the light pollution from the image, yeah, it's going to increase the amount of contrast because you'll see what your true background will look like and what it should look like, because all that gradient is gone. But I think Adam was saying no because I'll let Adam explain why he said no.
Well, what I was saying was more that at the time I was like talking about a nebula-heavy region where if you do put those sample points in, that's the danger, is that you will kill the nebula. And I don't disagree with what Hytham said at all. If you put all the points in properly, then you're going to get more contrast. You're pretty much separating your background from anything that's not background. And if you do it properly, then it is gonna help with the nebula. I think I was more. I was saying kind of in the context of what happens if you put the sample in the wrong point, or what happens if you do it improperly, because I think that's where we're all kind of hitting that wall.
So does this? We'll keep going on that because I know you're playing with both of these. Does this work better than some sort of inverted mask in Photoshop with Gradient Exterminator?
I can't comment on that. I've never used it.
I use Gradient Exterminator. It's funny because Gradient Exterminator, when I run it, it fixes the gradient, but at the same time, sometimes it just also makes the picture look better. In which case, I just say, well, you know what? I like the way it looks, and it's not. I don't know if it's just the gradient that it does. Now I know it also might normalize the background somewhat, but it's. I'm trying to think of the image that I used it with most recently. It might have been my Veil Nebula, but I can't think of why DBE wouldn't have worked for that. Might have been my Iris Nebula. It was my Iris Nebula, and I had to mark out certain areas, but there was a lot of dark dust in it. And for some reason, I just liked the way Gradient Exterminator looked after I performed it, as opposed to DBE. Actually, this might have been after I even did DBE, but I don't know. I think Gradient Exterminator works really, really well. I use DBE to get rid of that initial gradient in the background, and I don't really have problems using it. It's when it gets into like the really tough stuff, like what I've been saying, that's where I have troubles.
Yeah, it's never been explained very clearly that, how do you define a good point? Now, if a good point is just solely based on free background, and again, we're just running in circles with the conversation when it comes back to, okay, dusty areas. How do I do that? Because even if I were to download a DSS plate image, though the DSS plate image will show me a free background, and that's where I can select a free background, but my image, or at least the data that is found in the pixels within my image, doesn't necessarily represent a free background because it actually contains dust or very faint data. I guess if you're trying to preserve the faint stuff, you don't want to select it.
Yeah, that's one thing I've heard consistently through all the tutorials is you don't want to select any nebula at all because it'll just be treated as gradient.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the goal then? Like my last picture, I don't think I have any space in the background at all. like anywhere. It's either dark nebula or it's part of, I think it's IC 1396, the elephant region.
Yeah.
And I don't think my field of view is like 1.5 degrees, and I think it's the entire field of view is part of that nebula. So what is your strategy at that point, right? It has an obvious gradient from top to bottom, and you don't have any free sky background. So, like, I mean, you must have some initial strategy of how to get rid of that gradient that's obviously there.
For me, in Photoshop, I would circle and invert the. I would circle all the nebula, which, if it's most of the image, it's going to be most of the image. If there's any dark background exposed, I would uncircle that, and I do the medium. What's it called? Medium. Let me see here. Coarse medium, and it still does impact the entire image, even though you haven't selected the nebula, and it tends to change the kind of the illuminance of the image so that it's more even. And that's been my strategy so far. That's kind of the magic of Gradient Exterminator that I can't explain.
So it does run the gradient, even though you don't, like let's say the bottom half of your image is much brighter than the top half, and most of the nebula is in the bottom, and you don't select it, it will still actually, if you get down there and select areas, it will still darken those. Is that what you're saying? Like,
yeah, it still does impact the spots that you don't.
Oh, okay. It doesn't completely ignore them. All right.
It doesn't completely ignore them. Yeah,
Right.
it just takes them into account.
Okay.
And that's where it works well at, in my opinion.
So what about picks inside? So you have to pick some points that are in the brighter areas on your image.
Yeah,
You just have to go for it and pick the darker.
Just stepping back in Pix Insight, for most images, you can almost automatically auto-generate samples. I think you start with a default radius of, I don't know what the default is, but maybe it's 10.
I think it's 5. It's 5
default.
is the default sample radius.
Oh, wow, that's small.
5.
It's very small.
Yeah. You probably want to push that up. I think you'd probably want to get the best model within that radius sample as you can, without having lots of stars or having big stars. They say that it'll reject smaller stars, but I think it's probably better. Any smaller star that it's rejecting isn't being taken into account in the background model, so it's probably better just to get a better sample as opposed to being a little loose with that. Then number of samples per row, you can auto-generate that. There are two. You can change the tolerance. You can slowly bump the tolerance up and keep on generating the samples, and it'll grow the samples throughout the image. It might select some bad samples, but it'll grow the samples throughout the image, and it'll give you a good idea as to what a good, in general, way to automatically select them is. Then you go back through and delete all the bad samples that it automatically selected. And doing that alone, I've had a lot of good luck with it. It just really sets a good image off. I have a terrible gradient. I have the city on one side of me and pretty much woods and nothing on the other side of me. So the gradient just goes in one direction. And but just using those kind of like basic techniques, I've had lots of luck in normal images. I don't really have to worry about much dark dust from my red zone area because I don't see any dark dust. So I guess that's why I don't have much experience with that.
Yeah, this one here with Josh's image, this is a tough one with the O3 because there is a noticeable gradient that is over here in the top corner. It comes across, comes down this way as well, and it kind of fans out here and here. And it's going all the way up into the corners, and it's nice and dark in here, and then there's more gradient up here this way. So I don't know if that's a result of camera or...
That's how that camera was from the beginning. It was the scratching the debayer, or the Bayer matrix off, I think is what did that.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes... Alright, cool, because it was driving me nuts the first time I looked at it. like, what is this pattern? It's so weird because I don't. It's not as obvious in the HA.
Correct. It's always in the blue and green channel more.
That is really interesting.
Especially if you look at my flats, you can see it immediately.
Did you do it yourself, or you had someone else do it?
Louis Campos did it for me.
Oh, okay. Oops. Yeah, DBE is black magic to me. That is one of those things that I have not. It's funny because I understand pixel math, and everybody freaks out about pixel math. I don't understand background neutralization and color calibration, which is so easy for everyone else. But this is another one of those that, you know, it's really simple on images like this, but then the dusty images, I'm just completely lost. If anyone else has anything, any other suggestions, I'm all ears, absolutely 100%. I'm gonna find.
Are you generating samples on this, Hytham? I can't see. I don't know.
No, I'm sorry. What I ended up doing was I just manually placed them.
Oh, okay.
This is for the HA. So here's a sample here, 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 here.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, and I went up to a radius of about 8. I'm so used to going so small because of the dusty areas and trying to get a sample that doesn't have a whole lot of dust. I tend to go down to 5. Maybe that's part of it. I should probably increase it so I do include more of the region to be taken as a part of that background sample. And that's the other thing is, how do you determine the size of the sample radius? Is it the resolution of the image that also lends to it? Or that's the only thing I can think of. I don't know what else would be a part of that. Or
I
the
think
consideration.
you want to get a reasonable number of pixels without getting lots of stars. That would just kind of confuse it. So in one of your images, I think you'd have lots and lots of stars, and that's even this is a this isn't a wide field image, but it's in a star-heavy region, so it's probably a good example of it. But
because with the stars, now that's something that I've always found interesting when people say don't select one with a star near it, but because if you have your tolerance and your shadows relaxation, and I think not necessarily your minimum sample weight, but as long as you got your tolerance set, it shouldn't select the star. So here's an image, sorry, here's a sample that we'll use as an example. And if we take a look at over here, this box here, anything in black is not going to be considered as a part of the sample. Now if we move it towards one of these stars, so here's a star coming up from the top, see it's all black. It's not going to be taken into consideration. So even if we move here to a brighter star, there's the bright star. Starts showing up. So I always hear don't place it near, but as long as you've got these parameters set correctly, you could have it right next to a star and you'll be fine. I guess the biggest concern would be like a bright star down over here. If you start getting towards its halo, yeah, here you can see its halo extending out because it's all black. But even then, it's not going to be considered. So that's why I've always wondered, people say don't go near halos of stars, don't go near the star, or else you're going to generate a bad model. I think the only thing I can think, and this is just me personally, I could be very, very wrong, is that you're not going to collect, you can see here, this is a bad sample because of how few pixels are going to be incorporated as a part of the background. And right away you can see that it's red anyway, so it will not be used.
that's exactly what I was going to say, is it's a bad sample because it's not really gaining you much because it's not giving you much of a sampling.
Yeah.
But if you are close to a nebula, then that shadows relaxation factor becomes much more important. But if you can stay away from the nebula, then I think you get some leniency with that.
Yeah, because we can see here, as soon as we get near the nebulosity, you can see how it goes. Immediately black. If we decrease the shadows relaxation and do a resize, yeah, it didn't do much. Probably have to go super low. Whoa. 1 in 100. Okay, so 1 is the lowest that you can go with it. All right. So 3 being the default. Yeah, I've never lowered this number. I typically increase it, but never lowered it. Black magic.
Huh.
Just to throw in another 2 cents on
Whoops.
Photoshop, another thing that helps out sometimes is using the actual gradient map as a mask, because it does a good job of actually blacking out any kind of dust or signal that lays above the background at all once you're near the end. It does a good job of kind of differentiating between your actual signal and the background.
Now, what do you think? So I'm going to do something different here. So let's auto-generate one. I'm really curious now, because I rarely use auto-generate here. So how many samples would you do typically for an image this size? 15 maybe? 10?
15.
And then default sample radius, I set it to 10, but I don't know if that's too big or too small.
I think 10 would probably be where I would start.
See, that is an ugly background model. Based on what I have seen and read. It always shows nice.
It's a pretty pelican.
Yeah. Based everything on like what I have read, it always says it's got to be a very smooth transition from either left to right, top to bottom, corner to corner, and stuff like this where you get holes is not optimal. But then when I look at the result, I just think it looks great.
Here, Python, would you auto-generate? Just click generate the samples.
Yeah, that's what I did here. This was auto-generated.
And okay, just wait. I need to wait a couple seconds because the resolution kind of catches up, so I can't see the samples yet.
Okay, no problem. I'll highlight some of the samples for you, or at least one. I can only do one at a time.
Actually, every time you highlight it, it needs to be refreshed. So I can see one of them, but
okay.
Try bringing the tolerance up a little bit.
So to say 0.6, 0.7.
Go up to 0.9 just to demonstrate it. We might bring it back down, but we'll see what happens.
All right. I'll just
I deal with big time gradients, so it might be way too much.
So I'll do a new generate here. So
they're covering everything, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep. Which was expected.
Right? Now drop it down to 0.7 and slowly work it down until it's somewhere in between, until it's at an appropriate level.
See, when I see some of these, like this one here, definitely selected nebulosity. This one down here.
I think if you were to bring the tolerance down and regenerate them, it would slowly select less nebulosity and less nebulosity.
Yeah, still getting quite a bit.
Yeah, and then 5 is the default, right? So
Yeah.
5 is where we started. Yeah, you know what? Now I'm seeing all the samples.
Yeah, see if you look at this background model, that has valid data in it.
Yeah, yeah.
So I would love to get one of the Pi guys on here.
Yeah. So would you mind going back to 0.5 and generate it again? Because I'm now seeing the samples I wasn't seeing before.
Oops, generate. Because I've seen other tutorials where people say select the gradient. I'm like, what? Why would you want to select the gradient? That doesn't make sense to me. But because it seems almost counterintuitive. That's what I always hear.
The other question I have about this too is that a lot of times regions like this, if you take, I guess this is sort of more of a close-up compared to a lot of people will take an image of the entire Veil Nebula region, and you can, when you zoom out, kind of same thing with like M42 and the Horsehead, where the bubble, the more you zoom out and the more data you look at, the whole region is completely full of nebula, which doesn't stand out as much when you're zoomed in this far. And I just wonder sometimes, I guess pictures like this are processed to have the target stand out more, but if you zoom way out, then there's nebula going across the entire region. So, I mean, is the strategy Is that your strategy with stuff like this, is to make the actual target stand out more and differentiate between that and the, I guess, diffuse nebula throughout the entire picture?
For me, yeah, absolutely. Like you want to try to highlight the dust and all the really cool features as much as you can by removing that gradient, but it's just, I've found it to be such a nuisance. This is my biggest struggles. I've got DBE, background neutralization, color calibration, and it's been absolutely nuts.
Well, sometimes, that's why I asked, sometimes it seems really difficult to differentiate between the diffuse background nebula and gradients as well, I think.
Yeah, especially the really, really light stuff. Like if we were to zoom in here on your image, because this is weak background signal right here. This is valid signal all in here. And that's the stuff I want to preserve, and you've got to differentiate it, say, from this stuff up here.
Which might have a higher value than the valid signal down on the bottom.
Yeah, because we're looking at it, it says it's 0.0268. And this stuff down here is around 0.20281, 249. It's one of life's mysteries. My only complaint about PixInsight. Need more documentation. And yeah, yuck. Let's compare that to 10, 15, bump up the tolerance, say to 750. Generate. Take a look at that model. Yeah, that made it far worse by bumping up the tolerance. Maybe decreasing the tolerance down to like 0.3 or something. Let's go to 0.4. Less than 3 samples were generated, so too low. What happened there? That's a new one. I've never seen that before. See if it does it again. Yeah. Black magic. That's what I'm going with. I'm trying to find a in my data files here. Oops. Of one of the dusty regions that I've been working on. Cygnus. Oh yeah. Pix. Panels. Okay, let's see. Oh, okay. Stack rejection low. Now here's a good example. This one was taken with the moon up. So you can see there's a gradient that's coming, that's really bright up here. And then makes its way darker down into this region. But you can see some really, really faint background stuff as well.
Is that with an HA or is that lumens?
It's HA.
Wow, that's a pretty strong gradient for HA.
It is. That's why people are like, oh, you can image with the moon up. No, you can't. If it's too close, no, you freaking can't. Every time I see that, I get annoyed.
Is it the sky glow that does it, or is it the actual moon itself?
This is the moon.
See, that's what I actually am fortunate with my house, where the moon I'm set up right next to my house and shoot everything north of it, so I'm not shooting over top of it. But the house blocks out the moon for 80% of its travel all night long. So.
Yeah. So here's the panel. So this is just to give you an example. Get rid of that. Holy shit. Let's close these out for now. These were taken on 2 different days. This was with the moon up. This was with the moon down. These panels are right beside each other. So it's crazy what a difference the moon makes.
Wow.
Dramatic.
The gradient isn't as bad here because everybody tends to forget it's reflected sunlight. And since it's hydrogen alpha, it doesn't scatter anywhere near blue-green light does. Not even close. So, yeah, image with the moon up, total BS.
So it is the moonlight actually going directly into your telescope and not the sky glow?
Yeah, because this is, like I said, this is here. This is a few days later when the moon
Right.
was nowhere near the object. Same position, right outside my driveway, right in front of the house.
Wait a minute, I got to go back to that.
So can you
The moon is going straight into your telescope without, and then not being sky glow. What's sky glow then?
Well, so the reason that I ask that to explain on it more is, like I said, my house blocks out. It's 3 stories tall and it blocks out the moon from
Yeah,
my
and
view.
I couldn't see that because the moon is still lighting up the sky up above.
That's
And
why I
all
asked.
the- Pardon?
Well, that's why I asked specifically if it's sky glow or if it's a lot of light coming directly from the moon into his sky.
Oh, I understand what you're saying. I just misunderstood you. Okay.
So what was that? What was the answer is that if you've got a bright moon up there and if you've got any kind of atmosphere up above, moisture in the air, pollutants, whatever, is going to reflect moonlight. And that's going to have some hydrogen alpha and a whole lot of other things in it. So you're going to get a gradient closer by the moon. It's going to be brighter, and away from the moon. But we're not talking about letting moonlight into the telescope tube.
Nope, that's a light leak.
Yeah. Or you're pointing at the moon, duh.
No, I just misunderstood. Yeah. No, I'm not pointed directly at the moon and taking its light in. No, this is the object is pointed away. The telescope is pointed away from the moon itself, but
So maybe that brings up the question: can you offset any of the light from the moon, by having the moon physically blocked out from your telescope's view? I wouldn't think so, but
no.
Not. Oh, I mean, if most modern telescopes have good baffling and all of that, that would be the only issue. Would be some sort of like localized light leak like that, but
like reflection off your dew shield or something.
reflection off your dew shield, or if it hits your with an SCT, if it hits your corrector plate in an odd way, and you get some sort of odd shadow or something, which I've had before actually recently, but it was just a fluke thing. It was actually while I was focusing, fortunately, not when I was imaging. But I think that'd be the only concern, like localized. It's good to get it out of the way because then you don't have to worry about anything like that. But locally, that's pretty much the only concern would be for like some sort of light leak. Haitham, on your image, so what would you do? Would you select just the darker areas? Like I see the top right, and then a little bit in the center bottom left a little bit, and then over to the right side. That's probably where I would select most of I would manually put the sample points, and then I would generate the background, moving the tolerances around. Is that what you would do?
Yep, that's what I tend to do. Is I try to find something that looks like it's a background, because dark nebulosity in here.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I also have difficulty with, because I don't want to select this because it's definitely valid signal, and you can see right away it's not a valid signal because it is very dark. So possibly here, none of that will work. Nope. Like I would have to adjust the tolerance value so I can select some of that. Because in here, this is a lot of good signal in here too. It's extremely faint, and the last thing I want to do is get rid of it, because you can see a lot of the dark nebulosity in here, down here, and I know this is valid signal. If we could do this. Oops.
I do think that comes in where they say quality over quantity.
Yep, absolutely. Select the right points. I've
Yeah.
always wondered if doing this would work. Is this what you were talking about earlier, Josh, just by creating an inverted mask?
Yes, that's what I do, and it seems like it works really well. And
'Cause
sometimes I use a
sorry.
gradient map.
Because this looks like it might actually work.
What was that gradient map? Is that a tool in Photoshop?
Yes.
Where is that located in Photoshop?
If you go to Layer, where is it? New Adjustment Layer, Gradient Map. And it gives you actually a little bit of a grayish image, which you can adjust your levels on to bring out what you want out of it.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Great, I've never even heard of it.
Is that like the same thing for PixInsight?
I'm not sure because I don't use PixInsight.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you can generate proper models then just by inverting the image like this, because I'm not seeing the same gradient as I did in this image. So I wonder if we can then build our points based on the whitest. No, because it does look a little bit grayer up here and it does go into whiter down here, so it does make sense. I'm a tool.
Sorry, you can also go to a new adjustments layer and do a gradient map on there in Photoshop.
The gradients in Photoshop, are you defining the gradients or is it defining the gradients? Is it looking for the gradients?
I'm actually using the image to define the gradient. So to answer your question, I guess Photoshop is by using the image directly.
Okay.
So
Not what I'm seeing.
See, that's a background model. That drives me nuts. I wish I could do that with really the other dusty areas with luminance images. Because that looks right. It looks like it simulates what I have here in my image. Just nice and bright, and then gradually gets darker. Same thing here. Bright, gradually gets darker. If we do a subtraction, discard it. Yeah, that looks way better, because now I can see there's structure in the dusty regions here. I can see the dust down in here. Okay, that one's even better. Yeah, that one's even better. Yeah, see, it's easy when you have free background. I just don't know what to do when you don't have free background.
I did just try putting 3 points in a specific image, and then setting all of my stuff. Just 3 points, or actually maybe there were more than 3. Let's see. Not many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 points, 6 points in an image, and it generated. I mean, I'm not scrutinizing it so terribly. I'll let you guys look at it, actually, if you don't mind me stealing your screen just for a sec.
No, absolutely. Go right ahead. Because I have only 9 samples in this image. Because whenever I work on the Cygnus panels, I generate them all manually, like you just saw me do. And I tend to use anywhere between 5 and 12, I think, samples at most.
Per line or per...
Just in the whole image.
Because there's very little background available. Even in this one, this is the image, the cocoon, and this is the background it generated, and you can see, hopefully you can see it. I used this default sample radius of 5, and just a few samples that I put in what I knew to be the darkest. It was the area behind the area where there was nebula. And,
so did you select? I'm sorry to cut you off really quick, but it looks like here, from my perspective, you selected the actual dark nebulosity from the cocoon itself, so the river or the tail?
Yes.
Okay.
And if I thought it was dark dust, then I wouldn't have done it, but from pretty much every image I've seen, it is pretty much just like, it doesn't really come out as dustiness, so I wasn't really concerned about killing that. The area closer to the cocoon, there is some actual dust, so I was careful not to do it there. And you can probably barely see the difference in lightness between the two, but it is there. I spent hours and hours and hours trying to pull it apart, so I know there's a little bit of a difference there, but not much. But when and I have the tolerance at 1 right now, and I want to say I had the tolerance at 0.8. And when I generated the, let me find this now. I need a much bigger monitor. When I generated the model, it looked like that. And you can see it. There's a little bit of lightness here, so I probably could have pulled it down a little bit. But when I applied it to the image, it had pretty good results. So now I lost the image. Just kind of correcting it across. This maybe a little bit of red up here, but for the most part, it kind of took the gradient right out of it. And this is the most difficult one of the most difficult I've dealt with because of the heavy star field. And I was surprised at how well it worked in regards to just a few sample points. Very, very few, actually.
Yeah, that's where, I think that's Rogelio. That's where I first learned, yeah, don't auto-generate, well, he didn't say don't use ABE, but he definitely said no need to auto-generate 1,000,000 samples across the image. It's just a matter of selecting the right areas. And, you know, he has similar images to what I take, you know, really wide field, dusty areas. But, as I said, don't know where to place those images ever, or those sample points within the images.
Well, I hate to say it, but I think we might have to move on to a different topic only because I think we could discuss this forever, and I don't know. We might need someone, even one of the Pix Insight guys to explain it. Then again, if we get some of their time, is this going to be the one question we have for them? Because I'm sure they could take up lots of time explaining everything, but might be a good one. Did anyone else have any other topics to suggest or anything like that?
Have you been looking over in the group chat column? There's several discussions going on.
Gradient Exterminator?
That one, Chris, is it? Just wondering how to get his... Speak up, Chris.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I did figure it out. Josh helped me out trying to get it for the CS3 for Photoshop.
What about your data, getting your data up on the...
Yeah, I don't know where I can put that. I don't know, is there like a Dropbox or is there somewhere I can put it?
The best thing you could do is sign up for your own Dropbox account, and I know you might not be able to get it done in the next like 5 minutes, but it's hard. Not that it's hard to share Dropbox accounts, but if we share a Dropbox account, it requires you to have as much available space as is going to be in the entire account, which means if somebody uploads something to our Dropbox account, you might have to delete stuff off your Dropbox account. It's kind of stupid.
Yeah.
So it's easier if you just upload us to the link to your Dropbox.
Got it.
For at least for the future, I'm going to suggest that. Has anyone tried Super Bias in PixInsight?
I have not yet, no.
I was thinking about giving it a try. I actually just downloaded the PixInsight update, and I did a Super Bias on one of my images, and I can show you the result, but it was kind of interesting. Let's see. I don't even remember where I put it now. Probably put it under here somewhere. There we go. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Interesting what it does to a bias. Definitely takes the noise out. It's a pretty smooth but kind of different looking bias. But I think once we're done tonight, I'm going to try applying it to one of my other images and see what it does, just to give it a try.
Yeah, the guys over in the CCD forum had a nice lengthy discussion regarding this particular topic to see whether or not it made a huge difference. And some of the images, it looked like it helped. Me personally, I think my bias is made up of 100 or 200 shots.
Yeah, I have 100 shots, but I just wanted to test it out. I think it might be more useful for DSLRs, especially Canons, if they have read noise issues. Might really help them characterize the sensor. But I don't know, it's kind of cool. I know it's kind of a hot topic because people are either going to love it or hate it, but I'm interested in just testing it out. I'm wondering why we don't have super flats. Flats can introduce a lot of noise, and it seems like it's really just the larger scale structure you'd be concerned with flats. Just your dust donuts and your gradient. I don't know, that was my thought.
I've read of some people who actually use sky flats to take care of their gradients, but they're not like normal sky flats where you shoot at dawn, but you actually just try and shoot a blank space of the sky to get rid of them, which is interesting.
Yeah, if you're remotely set up and you don't have a flat box, you can do that, and you can turn your tracking off, and even if there are bright stars that happen to be going through the field of view in the daytime, your stacking will average them out. So that is kind of an interesting technique. I think it's more one out of necessity if you have to do it. Or I shouldn't say that. I know a lot of the guys at New Mexico Skies still use it, but kind of an interesting technique.
Alex, were you saying you couldn't find that gradient map that I was talking about?
What I was saying was that I found the gradient layer, apply the gradient layer. That's all the further I went on it. I thought it would be best to do that offline rather than while you guys were talking about other things I wanted to follow.
Okay.
So I didn't go too far. I did look at the gradient layer, gradient adjustment layer, and called it up, and no, that's where I tell it what the gradient is and apply it, and that didn't seem like it would be too useful unless I already knew what the gradient was. So, but I'll go looking later for where else is it besides the levels or layers rather.
You can do that same thing, the image adjustment and then gradient map, or you can do a new fill layer. The one other thing that I wanted to start messing around with, and you guys might find this image interesting, that last week Scott pointed us out at, or pointed us to, was the shoot, I can't remember what it was called, but it kind of does a real hard stretch of the data, and then when it does that, it shows you kind of what your
Equalize, right?
Equalize,
yeah.
yep.
So I'm going to share the screen, and I don't know if you guys can see this or not, and then actually invert that, and then use that as the mask, and then use gradient exterminator. So I'm going to click this off, and click this off, and it does a pretty good job of actually applying gradient exterminator to all of the background and not the data itself. And that's something I just started messing with this week, and it seemed like it worked on this image here. I don't know if it's coming through or not.
So can you? So I'm sorry. Before you jump ahead, can you go back and show us the mask that you had used?
So you used equalize, inverted, and then used that as the mask for gradient exterminator. Is that right?
Correct.
It looks pretty awesome inverted.
Yeah, it does. And it actually, it seems like it's worked. I've tried it on a couple of pictures. You have to smooth it out a little bit. I was just bringing this up to show you now, but I actually used.
Gaussian blur?
What's
that? Is that right? Was that a Gaussian blur? Is that how you do it?
I did both that and Noise Ninja actually, because there was kind of enough speckling in it. Sometimes I've tried even the despeckle on it, because I didn't want to adjust the levels too much. So kind of played around with all three of those: despeckle, Gaussian blur, and Noise Ninja on the mask itself. I thought it seemed like it did a pretty good job of actually kind of giving a nice flat background. So I don't know if that's similar to what DB is trying to do as well or not.
Because I guess the question that arises in my mind is that if you're inverting it, you're still inverting all of the signal as well, or the bad signal. So the unwanted stuff, the gradient too. So
generally the way that gradient exterminator tries to work is it tries to give you a neutral background or like kind of a consistent background throughout. So my understanding is that if you can kind of gray out some of the area that is already where you want it in the brighter section of the background, it kind of gives you just a nice smooth application across the lighter area, which meshes right into the darker area. Which seems like it works. I don't know if that's really what happens or not.
Yeah, because if it's neutralizing the background based on that data, so is it... Because I'm thinking of how DBE's division works. And if I remember correctly, nobody ever quotes me on this one because I'm not entirely sure, it takes the average pixel brightness and then divides it across the entire image, if I remember right. I'm not sure if that's how it does it exactly, but then if you do that, are you not washing out some of the valid signal that is found?
It's a valid question. I'm not positive. Seems like there's tweaking going back and forth with the levels on that.
I just looked at your image. Are you? Oh man, you took my idea. I'm ticked.
Oh, you didn't see this yet?
All the stars?
No, dude. I was telling my girlfriend the other day about that. I'm like, I'm going to do something that nobody else has ever done.
That's exactly what I thought.
So screw you. Oh, I'm so ticked.
Hey, this is the IAC. You got to watch your language. I've been meaning to do that for like a year now, and I couldn't do it with my filter drawer. It was just going to take too long. So I was excited about that.
That's funny. Yeah, I've been wanting to... Yeah, we're getting off topic. But yeah, that's what I want to do. I'm like, nobody's ever done this. I'm going to go do this. RGB stars with monochrome nebulosity.
It turns out pretty cool, I thought. I liked it a lot.
It does. It does turn out really neat. Yeah, I guess that's the bigger question that I have is, are you now protecting the gradient with that mask?
be protecting the gradient.
Yeah, because if you're inverting the image, it's going to highlight, it's going to darken the highest signal within the image itself.
I see
So
what
that
you're
would
saying.
be,
Yeah.
that would be my question regarding that. That's the only thing that
I
can
guess
think of.
I guess I'm not sharing it. What it seemed like it did, for whatever reason, is it actually seemed like it brought out the fainter nebula and neutralized the background.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about that. I'm going to have to look into that technique a little bit more, because it's something we can definitely do in PixInsight. If you just invert the image itself, apply that as a mask, or no, that didn't work. Never mind that thought.
How does Jerry Lodrigus do it? Because he uses an inverted mask to get rid of a gradient. It's probably a similar technique.
It's a good question. I remember reading about that a while ago now. I don't remember exactly what he does, because he does his manually, right? He doesn't actually use gradients.
Yeah, on his website it's shown manually. It looks like an older version of Photoshop, so he might not still be doing it that way, but...
Right. So if you see here, I don't know if this shows up well or not, but I mean, to me, even this little kind of faint nebula here seems like this is off, and then this is back on. It seems like it actually helps bring it back out. And zooming back out and zoom back in, it seems like it helps kind of with this little dusty region. This is off, and this is back on, and it brings it out here too, it seems like.
Yeah. There's definitely more contrast.
So technically, I'm not sure why it works, but it seems like it does for some reason.
There's definitely more contrast. It's hard to say whether it's actually dimming real nebula or not.
Right.
So you're enjoying your new CCD?
Not only that, but I bet it was the first time anybody has gotten a new CCD, and it was clear so many nights in a row I couldn't stay up last night. I was too tired.
The moon's up, so it doesn't count.
Well, you guys see the picture I took, and I barely had to use Gradient Exterminator on it. So
yeah.
So despite what Hytham said, it still seemed like it worked okay for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I like DSLRs. I had no idea that the difference would be so big, though. Just kind of insane.
It's just such a solid piece of equipment, too. It feels so much better, you know. With the modified DSLR is awesome, and it was less than $1,000, so it was, you know, a quarter of the price it cost me to get the new one. But it was, I don't know. There was just things hanging off everywhere and really wonky spacing. And my off-axis guider had, I think, 3 inches before I got to the sensor from it. So my off-axis guider was super tall, and it's just the whole experience is super clean. And it took me like 15 minutes to set up when I got home from work and was ready to go. Not a second thought. It's just a pleasant experience.
Yeah, the QSI looks like a nice package.
It really is. Solid as a rock. The cooling is pretty good, too. I don't know if it's what it is compared to DS Big. It was down at -20. I think it was like 70 out, running it at 80% capacity.
Mine doesn't run too well as far as cooling goes.
Yours is not. You have
Yeah,
a 583.
I got a 583 instead of a 683, and I think that they're the same as far as that goes. It's just some software changes to make the downloads faster. But I've got a cooler on the back of mine. Of course, I live in Southern California, and it's not unusual to have 100 and some degree days. So I've got a water cooler on the back of mine, and I take about a gallon worth of ice back there and just dump it into the tub every night. And it cools down in 10 minutes, or 5 minutes probably it cools down. So everything's fine. I just noticed I've got buddies with 583s, and mine just doesn't seem to cool like theirs does. No. So there. Well, now that I've got the cooler on it, it does, but it didn't ever cool that well. But I run it at -20, even in the Southern California regularly. So.
I can't run my STF at -20. this time of year. I have to run it at -10.
You don't have a cooler?
I have the cool. It runs at -10. I don't have water cooling or anything like that.
Yeah.
If I was at -20, it'd be close to 100%.
No, mine runs at 70, 80. And I don't know what it runs in the middle of the night because I never watch it in the middle of the night. It just all by itself doing whatever it does. But it takes about 5 to 8 minutes probably to get it down to -20. It's from at least plus 20, 26, 28 down to -20 in about 6 or 8 minutes.
Does it really matter that much? I mean, is it both noise and I guess if you're taking darks, does it matter that much, or does it matter?
You know, I see those discussions over on cloudy nights about how, oh, I can skip taking darks now because things have improved so much and stuff like that. I say, you know what, I don't buy all that. I think it matters. I've talked to Kevin a lot. He's the engineer that sells these QSIs, Kevin Nelson. And he says that get it to -20, and it's not going to get much different if you try to take it to -30. You can probably get it there, but it's not going to help much. -15, you probably won't notice the difference between that and 20. But if you can get it to 20, get it there and keep it there. And besides, that way I get to keep all my darks the same. Everything's always at -20, and everything's always a half hour at narrowband here and 15 minutes out in the desert when I go out to take LRGB with my other imaging ray. So it's always the same.
It's almost virtually impossible to get something like that for a DSLR, right?
Yeah,
Well,
I think so.
You talking about almost virtually impossible to get -20 or to get set point cooling?
Just set point cooling in general. I have a cooling box for my DSLR, and I can't get it anywhere close to saying 10 degrees below ambient temperature.
There's three that are being sold that I know of. And JTW Astronomy sells really expensive, really nice ones that seem like they actually are few and far between or they cost to buy. And then CDS, I think, is a little bit more reasonable, and all the reviews I've read about them have been great. And they also put a new cover on the front of your camera, so spacing isn't as much of an issue. And then the one that I was using until last week was done by Luis Campos, and he had he put a 60-watt tech cooler on mine, and I was running at between -10 and 0 set point cooling all the time, and it worked a lot.
Are you talking below ambient or below 0?
Below 0.
Yeah, and you realize, Chris, that we're talking below 0 degrees, not
right.
Absolute, not ambient.
Oh, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? I think that at some point, if you really want to cool it, the people who say, yeah, I got a DSLR and it does well, I'm not arguing with them. It does really, 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 really well. It's just that you have to have an asterisk on it. And that asterisk says, look what I can do with a consumer DSLR, with adding this cooler, with adding that, and eventually, if you really want to do it, you're going to have to go, with the cooled system, I think. Maybe 3 years from now, I'll change my mind, because it has gotten a lot better, and the gap has gotten less. And CCDs have not improved the way that DSLRs have. But really, my initial answer to your question is there any way you can get that DSLR down to those cooling temperatures? No. They just aren't made to do that.
Right.
Well, I also think that the biggest issue with the modified DSLRs, I mean, I think you can cool them to a certain point, which will help a lot. But if you want to take monochrome shots with the DSLRs, the only way to do that is to strip off the micro lens. And when you strip off the micro lens, your quantum efficiency drops significantly. So, I was really pleased with a lot of the shots I took with it. I took, I think, 6 pictures over the last 6 months with it, and I thought they were pretty good. I thought they compared to a lot of CCD images, but they took a ton of work. It took a ton of upfront work figuring out spacing and getting everything stable. And even at that point, like I said, the big thing was I could never fit a filter wheel in, and it was all kind of wonky. But it got to the point where I don't know. I thought I was getting really great images out of it. Just obviously.
But what did you say about when you got your 683? When it was 15 minutes after you got home, you put it on your telescope and you were out taking pictures?
Exactly.
So, what about that thing about the complexity of CCD? I mean, if he can do it, any of us can do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't buy the argument that I just don't buy it.
Well, actually, that's one point I wouldn't mind commenting on, because I think that going to CCD forces you, I don't want to say to get professional about it, but it forces you to get serious about it. And you have to be organized. You have to take flats for each filter. It's a commitment. And as long as you're committing that time, you might as well do it right. So you might as well be more obsessive compulsive about everything. And I think that's where it kind of, I mean, that was my concern with the CCD. Is it no longer going to be fun? And I'm still having fun. My results are justifying it for me. But that was a concern I had.
I agree with you. Well, my situation is probably unique since there's not many of them out there, but mine was a nice in-between. It was a step in between to kind of get used to it. But if you're going to spend that kind of money on a camera, then you may as well go all out. It does remove the that kind of buffer excuse saying, "Look what I did with the DSLR." So now it's make good images or figure out how to, and your equipment's not an excuse anymore.
Yeah, I've run out of a few excuses when I bought the expensive stuff. It's like, okay, it's not the equipment. It's you. It's you. You're the one that's screwing it up.
I think one of the few that's left is my imaging for my driveway, but then somebody like Hytham does the same thing from a red zone also, and so that's not an excuse either.
So did Gendler for years.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I enjoyed it. I have gotten to be such a better photographer since I decided to shoot narrowband for my driveway, and even a couple of LRGB ones. But it just, you get out so much more. I mean, it's probably takes 5 times the integration if I drove an hour away. But if I drove an hour away, I'd go out once every 2 months or once every month instead of every clear night.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about monochrome narrowband is that I can image with my HA filter from my driveway every single night that it's clear, as long as the object is not sitting on the moon. It's awesome. I don't have to pack the car up. I don't have to drive an hour to go to my dark site. It's great.
It's made a massive difference. As soon as I get SGT figured out and I can go to bed for reals whenever I get it up and running, then that'll make even bigger difference.
In about 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, I can probably do something about SGP for you guys.
That would be great. That would be really fun to see.
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
an awesome tool.
For one thing, it's not dark out here in California at 6:30 on a Sunday afternoon. So, but I can fake it. I can show you what I know about SGP.
Definitely one of the best tools out there.
You know, I was doing some troubleshooting on my CCD, and I called up SBIG tech support, and they've never heard of Sequence Generator Pro before.
You know what? Sequence Generator Pro for a long time had difficulties with interface on SBIG. I think they've overcome it. I'm not sure, but I think they have.
I was having my own issues. I think I've got them sorted out down to a bad USB cable, but I was pretty frustrated.
Especially right after you got your new toy, right?
Right after. I had issues with the camera when I first got it with this interference pattern, and then I don't know if it was just user error over and over and over again, but kind of struggled with it.
It's the one thing. My dad's had the SBIGs for years, and 4 or 5 years, but he's always had issues with their connectors more than anything else. They had that the issue, I guess, with the ST with the dew heater not working very well or not existing. But the biggest issue has always been the connectors on those that he's ever had.
I was at a conference once, listening to Craig Stark, and afterwards people were coming up to him saying, "Hey, how do I fix this or how do I fix that? I'm having a problem with so-and-so." He says, "Well, if you check the USB cable." And after about 8 or 10 of various questions, he said, "Look, always, just change the USB cable first. Before you call me, before you do anything else, change the cable and see if that does it."
I couldn't agree more. I bought 24 USB cables from Amazon last year when I started. After 2 of them crapped out on me, I was like, and I carry them with me everywhere I go. Could not agree more.
I'm considering switching over to the ones with the vinyl sleeves so that they like slide through the mount wiring a little bit better. That's the only thing I can think of to keep them. I don't know what makes them go bad, because this is actually the second one I'm using. But
I ruined a couple during the winter when it was cold out, but and obviously you're not dealing with that. What
no,
about
that could be it. I have mine out in the observatory. So.
You also had a sprinkler system issue too, right?
Yeah, the sprinklers, but the camera and the telescope didn't get it. It was all of my like equipment boxes and whatnot. My laptop got it, but it was I looked over my camera and my telescope pretty well, and nothing up there got it. So.
Right, but your USB cables weren't affected at all, or your boxes.
You know, maybe where it hit the laptop. I'll tell you, the next thing I was going to look at was replacing the laptop in case the USB coming into the laptop was bad, because my laptop has been operating slowly. But I was a little bit reluctant to think that, because it did work for me a couple days before it stopped working.
Have you gone down the route of checking your contact cleaners and stuff like that? There are such things. As a matter of fact, the fellow that runs, I think it's New Mexico Skies, I saw him at a presentation at an advanced imaging conference, and he said that, again, it's always the USB cables, but that you should be using some of the contact cleaners on them on a regular basis, and I think he came up with the rule to just change all your USB cables every year, because they do corrode and wear out and lose contact.
Yeah. That's not a bad point. I've never cleaned a USB cable. I've replaced them. But this one was painful. I had to walk over to Radio Shack and buy them. I'm actually a mono price guy, so I pay $2 or $3 each cable. So I had to walk over to Radio Shack and pay $21. But it was...
Yeah, but look at it this way. They probably sold you 3 or 4 phones, too.
They tried to. Yeah. But I got that new surge protector just in case. Pretty sure it was a cable though.
Oh, speaking of cables, I'm sorry, Adam, to interject on a different route here, but QSI does not sell a 12-volt adapter for their camera. Alex, did you create a cord and run yours off 12-volt, or do you always use
adapter? What do you mean a 12-volt adapter?
They have the cord that goes into the AC adapter. But to run it off 12 volts, you have to make your own.
Just a cigarette lighter will do.
Okay, so you've used it off 12 volts?
I have used it off 12 volts. I very rarely take it. I don't take it remote. If I'm going to go remote, well, I don't go remote that much because I've got 2 observatories. Why go remote? But I also, like if I go up to Yosemite or Mono Lake or someplace where I want to go like that, I took the DSLR and go that route. I don't take the full rig and the Gemini and the Los Mondi stuff. I just take the little GM8 or something like that. But yes, I have long enough to know that I can do it, but that's about it. Just a cigarette lighter, the standard kind of thing. It's 12 volts is 12 volts.
Yeah, I think that I can't remember if it's Starlight Express. One of them complains a lot if your power supply is not highly regulated, but it seemed like QSI said it between 11 and 14 is fine. So just curious about that.
Yeah, I think Astrophysics says that too. I think it's 13.7 volts or something, which I bought a pyramid power supply to run off AC. Off the battery, I think it just covers it. But
oh, so there's maybe one more. I'm glad we're talking about this. I do have another question. I was using a pyramid power supply, and I was running my inverter off of it, and it kept tripping the surge protector, even though I knew I wasn't. It was a 30 amp.
Wait a minute. Why were you running an inverter off of off the 12 volt pyramid? Why didn't you run? I don't understand.
In retrospect, I should have just used a power strip, but I brought a drop cord from. I had to run it a ways from around my house, and I could have just plugged the surge protector in at that point, but I have the inverter plugged directly into my whole DC power strip, so I tried to run my whole DC power strip off of my pyramid power supply, and then that's where I was. Well, it kept tripping right away. I was wondering if that might be the cause, and then
Well,
I never had a chance to test it.
I don't understand why people put an inverter to get something. Yeah, for most of our equipment, it's 12 volt anyway.
Right.
You know, so just run it off the 12 volt, whatever that takes. You miss one conversion step, and that saves some energy.
Yeah, no, I agree about saving energy. I was just wondering if that might be the cause of it tripping. I was surprised that.
Well, you know, I don't know what your inverter does.
It's probably square wave.
Yeah, square wave or sine wave, and that may have been the problem.
Right. Worth looking into for sure.
Well, kids, it's 8:30, so it got dark.
I had to deal with forest fires from northwestern Canada for a week and a half. 5 clear nights in a row, and the whole sky in the middle of the day was a milky white, no blue at all. It was unbelievable amount of smoke.
That's the way it's been here.
Oh, man.
A bunch of clear days in a row, but it's been the first night I shot, I could barely see any stars, but I was set up anyway, so I was just going to leave it out there. Second night it got a little bit better, but it's been awful.
Yeah, I didn't even bother. I just stood outside and I looked up. I could barely see the Big Dipper. I just thought, nope, not worth it. And 5 clear nights in a row, no clouds. It was just smoke in the upper part of the atmosphere. But then thankfully clouds came in and rains came in and just picked up whatever the particulates were up in the atmosphere and took them away. So hopefully the next couple nights clear.
Well, moon. Super moon tonight. Or was it last night? Super moon.
Yeah, I thought it was last night.
It was last night.
Yeah, it was this date, but I think it was Greenwich time. So. Well, good night, everybody. See you next week.
See you next week. Maybe I'll do another post on cloudy nights, and we'll try and come up with a topic or something.
Adam, did you reach out to Anna?
I haven't. That'll be a good opportunity. I'll do that. I'll try and do that soon, and then if we hear back from her, we hear back from her. If we don't, we don't. I haven't seen her on cloudy nights, but we'll see what happens.
Isn't she out? Is she in England or France?
We think she's back here.
Oh, she's back in the U.S. again?
Somebody said she was last week.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then never mind my next comment. Perfect.
We were talking about maybe having her doing tone mapping, or her version of tone mapping.
Yeah, she has it outlined on her website, I think.
Yeah, it's a good tutorial. It's what sometimes I wonder on these if we should be going into things that tutorials already cover or not, or just pointing to them.
I would say have them demonstrated anyway, even if the tutorial exists, because sometimes you're writing up the tutorial doesn't have all the little bits of detail, not every single thought that's running through their head and the reasons why they did what they did.
Right.
Exactly.
And you can ask them questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to amplify on that, I wouldn't mind running a few of the well-known tutorials and having all of us sit there and comment and ask him, what did he really mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
If you know what I mean.
It's a good,
I agree.
Great point.
Is that okay to do?
No. Well, actually, it probably is. For educational purposes, you can do that kind of stuff. But it would be perhaps rude to do. These guys are, for some of them, making their living off of it, and you just don't want to do that for them because then in showing their tutorial,
Yeah.
you are, putting it out and publishing it on the net. But since you're doing it for educational purposes and various other things and nonprofit, you probably wouldn't get sued. But it's just rude.
Probably.
I agree. Scott didn't want us to post the video to the group or post it on YouTube, but he was more than happy to come on and give a discussion about it. So I think it's better to reach out to these people if we want to use techniques.
Yeah.
No, I just, my comment is more along the lines of an awful lot of time as I'm sitting there listening to so-and-so or so-and-so, I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, go back, and, you can't do that. But here you can. Here in this group discussion you can, and that's what makes it different. Or you can make these comments over on the side here.
Yeah, it's too bad we couldn't get one of the Pi guys. They charge. I wanted to go out to one of their presentations. They were holding one at Harvard recently, I think.
Yeah.
And there's a new one at Katona, New York.
Oh, that's the newest one. Yeah, I would love to go out.
Not so far from me, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, I wonder how much you could learn in that little amount of time, even though you're like intensive on it. But
it depends a lot. I've put on a lot of shows at various kinds where I have people come out, and I mean I've got one coming up in October 22nd or 3rd or something where I've got some pretty important people coming out to spend the day with us. And the problem is if you get more than about 15, 20 people, you got to be careful to get as much as you can out of it. You got to really push the point. You got to really ask your questions, and you don't necessarily get what you had hoped to get. You get a lot more than not doing it at all, but depending on what somebody's charging for it. If somebody's charging you $40-50 for it, it's great for a day's adventure, or $100 for it maybe. But if somebody's charging you $250 or $400, which can happen at some of these things, it better be pretty much one-on-one intensive, or 2 or 3-on-1.
Mm-hmm. Alex, did you do that thing with Ken Crawford that looks pretty cool?
I know Ken, and I've visited with Ken, and I've had him present at one of my workshops. But I don't know. He's got another. He does a imaging workshop. No, I haven't done that.
Yeah.
I haven't done Adam Block's, although I've had Adam Block present at various things. I work with RTMC. I work with Nightfall. I worked with the Pacific Astronomy and Telescope Show, putting on their imaging workshops. So I know these guys quite often, and I've visited with them. I've been to NEAF and NEAC a couple of times, or 3 times, or something like that. So I'm not a very good imager. I can't produce this kind of stuff, but I'm pretty good at getting to know what they can do and how it operates and stuff like that. So, yeah.
It's funny how that works in this hobby, where you may have a topic that you've researched really well, but have not so much experience with necessarily, or you're not the best at it, but you have a lot to contribute, and it's kind of funny because
I tell you what, I wouldn't want John Madden on my front line if I was the quarterback, but I sure wouldn't mind having him on the coaching staff.
Yep, good point.
So I guess that's where it is. At any rate, so next week we don't actually have a topic yet. We're going to be working on it.
Yeah, we're going to be working on it. I'll try Anna. I'm trying to think. What I would love to do is I'd love to have it be clear, but I haven't been at my house much. I know Chris or Rajanar on Cloudy Nights was looking to see collimation done in MetaGuide. And I thought that would be interesting because MetaGuide's been a pretty cool program for collimation, and I've done it a few times. I'm not great at it, but I'm okay at it. And that's one topic that comes up. These live sessions would be, or live style imaging sessions where you're actually under the sky could be nice if it works out. I know it's not yet dark at Alex's place. It's dark here, just not clear.
Can you use an artificial star? Go ahead.
Does anybody know if you could play a video like from your desktop when you're screen sharing?
You can, but you can't always talk. For some reason, the video cuts out your mic.
My audio did not come through last week when I tried to do that as well.
Your audio off the movie?
Correct.
Okay. What I was thinking of doing for SGP was taking a video, off the iPad or my little camera dealie, and of going out and opening up the observatory for the night every night that I do, when I'm doing that, and then coming back in and showing you that. And I'll do that any old time before the meeting, and then I'll show you that. It's about 3 minutes it takes me to open up the observatory, get it started. So I was hoping you could, in fact, show a video.
Yeah, that didn't work last time when Josh tried it. We might be able to play with it and see if there's a way to get it to work, kind of like treating the full screen and all that.
Screenshots of MetaGuide, because I would like to try to help to do something like that too, because you can't use MetaGuide with a DSLR.
Can you use an artificial star?
I think you'd be able to use an artificial star. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to use an artificial star. But the feature, one of the cool features with MetaGuide is that it automatically centers the star.
Have your kid go out there and move the artificial star.
Yeah. Stay still, now move. Stay still, now move.
Adam, but if you were doing it live, you would be speaking anyways, and you could hear me speaking. You just couldn't hear audio off the video stream, right?
I think your mic cut out. We couldn't hear you at all.
Could you hear the sound on the movie? If I played a movie, could you hear the sound off of it?
That was the problem. I thought. I can do a quick run on it. I have it sitting here. If you want to.
Who's got a movie?
Yeah, give it
play
a shot.
Play a movie and see what happens.
I do. Give me 1 second. I'll pull it up here.
Okay.
I still hate you, Josh.
Still your idea. You can still do it. You'll probably do it better than I did.
No. Yeah, right. Whatever. I'm still ticked.
It'll just be the second person who's ever done it.
Somebody must have done it before. I did search though, and I couldn't find it. But
I know. I never found it either. I want to do it with my whole mosaic.
Oh man.
I wish you could have seen. I wish I had a camera so you could see the look on my face the moment I realized that was monochrome with a color star. I'm ready to get a plane out to Philadelphia. So ticked.
You'll be closer to Adam than me. Don't worry.
Yeah, good thing you're in Pittsburgh.
Damn it.
You didn't take like 11 of your 12 frames in RGB already too, did you?
Yeah, I did.
Did you really?
I'm not kidding. I have now 27 frames for my Cygnus mosaic. I just have been posting them up. I was going to wait to get to about 40 to 45 before I showed you guys the whole thing, and I've been taking RGB as well. I'm like, oh, I'll just take 5 minutes of each one.
Ouch.
It's okay. It's not like I absolutely hate you.
Okay. That's unfortunate.
Oh well.
So you're only a week away too. It sounds like.
Yeah.
All right, I'm pulling up the video now.
I hate you. Does what's his name ever join us? What is his real name? Mad Ratter.
I don't know.
I don't know.
He doesn't share his real name, so.
I'd say it, but I better not.
Yeah.
There's Tim.
All right, I am playing video now. I'm going to try and share the screen. Can you hear me or my video?
I can hear
I
you.
can hear you, can't see your video.
I
I can
see it now.
hear you. I can see the video. But I can't hear it.
Still can't hear it? Can you see it still?
Can absolutely.
I can hear a little bit in the background, but it's
Yeah, because it's going to rely on your
really
microphone.
faint, really faint.
Yeah,
I
it's
can't
relying on
even
your
see the
microphone.
video. Can you guys see the video?
I don't think I can. It just says Camsta Studio.
Nope, I can't see it.
Well, we all have to be quiet and you have to talk.
Can you guys hear me still?
Yep.
Yes.
I think I broke my computer because now I have control over nothing and it froze in place.
Well, that's my life in general.
I can't believe you can hear me still because my computer seems to be doing nothing at all.
Yeah, I've got a frozen Camtasia. As a matter of fact, everything's frozen now. For a while there, we were bouncing back and forth between whoever was talking.
But you can still hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you, and I can see your screen, but nothing's moving on your screen.
That's incredible. Well, there's your answer from Camstasia. Maybe you need an MP4.
Well, you know what? This says share the screen. It doesn't say share the screen in audio. Maybe we're in the wrong place.
That's a good point.
Are we still live?
Yeah.
We are. I go back. I
Yeah,
go back.
but it's a small